How far did you go in school?
To 8th grade.
Are you able to read, write, speak, and understand the English language?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you under the influence of any medication, drugs?
Punishment usually follows crime, but some sentences are so extreme they make us question the very idea of justice. From horrifying acts of violence to shocking betrayals, these cases expose the limits of human behavior and the legal outcomes that defy belief. Let's dive into some of the most astonishing sentences ever handed down in court. Granville Ritchie. In May 2014, Felicia Williams was left all alone in the care of a monster in Granville Ritchie, who molested and strangled the 9-year-old girl to death. The prosecutor stated that the little girl was betrayed by a family friend in Ebony Wiley, who helped with a cover-up, hoping to protect herself from any backlash that might want to come up. She later admitted on the stand, on Ritchie's trial, that she lied during the investigation. In the year 2019, after about 5 years of the fugitive escaping justice, he was later convicted of child R-word and murder. Then, fast forward to September of the next year, he was sentenced to death by a jury. And just recently, the Florida Supreme Court rejected his request for a do-over for the pretty harsh and crazy sentence that was passed on him. In a desperate measure to make sure he wasn't sentenced to death, he began asking for police records and police documents, as well as from multiple agencies. He was basically trying to spot any error that could actually aid him in escaping certain justice and give Mitchell a second chance on an appeal hearing. The prosecutors referred to this term as a fishing expedition, and also the Tampa judge. Mitchell wanted to make sure it didn't turn into one of those kinds of cases. I'm not interested in just full-scale fishing expeditions, but rather a more targeted request that could potentially lead to a colorful claim. And obviously, I would find the defendant is entitled to it. It was during a virtual hearing on a Thursday when the court got an update that documents had been turned over, and whatever evidence still needed to be given to Ritchie should be given. He immediately ruled it out by stating to the public, "I am going to grant the defendant's request for public records, solely in part as it relates to any records from the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office by their Child Protective Services." If Ritchie could manage to find any mistake in any record that he has in possession, it would give him the power to fight his death sentence and possibly overthrow it even.
What your spiritual leanings are, and it really does not matter to me either way. I am very grateful that I live in a country where people can believe or disbelieve anything they choose, and that applies to you equally. However, if you do ever pray to a higher power, either now or at some point before the date of your death is scheduled to occur, and you truly seek forgiveness and redemption for the sins and the crimes you have committed, I hope that you are granted it. And I do still see the humanity in you.
After trying to overthrow his death sentence, the court wasn't going to hear any of it as Ritchie was called to the stand, and it was proclaimed to him that the court agrees with the jury's death sentence on him, as the evidence presented agrees with a strict sentence like that. Assaulting then killing a minor should warrant a punishment worse than death. Furthermore, it was stated that the criminal would be delivered to the Florida Department of Corrections in the Florida State Prison, where he would be held in probation until a certain date of his execution would be decided by the state governor of the state of Florida. He had 3 counts of charges, and each one of them resulted in a brutal punishment, all in the case of the murder, exploitation, and assault on a minor by an adult.
Redemption for you. And what I mean by that is of your physical being, your person. You will remain incarcerated until the date of your death is scheduled to occur.
The very last thing the judge had to say to Granville Ritchie, she was blatantly stating to him in very simple terms about his spiritual leanings and all that he believed in, and urged him to pray to any higher power that he believed in between that time and when he would be executed, so that his soul would find forgiveness for the heinous crimes he had committed. She closed her statement to him saying, May God have mercy on your soul.
There will be no corporal redemption for you. And what I mean by that is of your physical being, your person. You will remain incarcerated until the date of your death is scheduled to occur.
That was the end of the case of Granville Ritchie, who assaulted and murdered 9-year-old Felicia, leaving her family in pain and agony. His execution was later decided to be carried out by electrocution by the laws of the state and the governance. Ronnie O'Neill. In the year 2018, the pair of a mother and her daughter were brutally murdered, or better still, betrayed, by the one they never thought would betray them. Humans are cruel, but this level of cruelty is worse than any could imagine, looking at the proposed role of the murderer. In their home at Riverview, while the reasons for the murder were pretty unclear, it was a really heartbreaking and emotional story. His daughter, Ron Nevea, had probably the saddest exit a child with special needs could ever experience. He came into the house and attacked his own family, shooting his girlfriend and killing her on the spot. While the most aggravating of them all was his daughter, who had special needs and could not talk. She just stood there and watched as she couldn't run or talk, while her dad, Ronnie, struck her with a hatchet and killed her on the spot before setting the house on fire. His 8-year-old son, who testified against him, said that when Ronnie struck Ron Nevea with the hatchet, he saw a tear fall from her eyes. It was literally the most brutal way for a child to go, as she was betrayed by the one who was supposed to be her protector all through her life.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
As if the devil himself came up to earth to inhabit a body on earth and perpetrate all sorts of undoings. While being presented at court, Ronnie showed a rather nonchalant attitude toward the court and all its attendees, raising his voice and infuriating the affected with every chance he got. He started off by saying to the court that he's not sorry for what he didn't do. And damn straight, he's not sorry for what he did do. That was a statement that was clearly saying, I don't give two Fs, do your worst. The judge cautioned his lousy behavior and threatened to eject him from the court before he composed himself, not until he got another chance to say something silly again. This time he stabbed the rubber balloon with a flaming sword, facing the mother of the deceased, and said to her with a silly grin on his face, "Sorry for your loss." And that was enough to make everyone know if he saw his girlfriend and his kid again, he would kill them again without even blinking, and even in a more brutal way.
This is the worst case I have ever seen as far as the facts go.
Judge Sisko could not hide her regrets and her disappointment in the act that just happened, and the fact that the father showed not even a single blink of remorse at all. I mean, he just killed his little girl who had special needs. How could he go through with it? She furthermore stated that this case was the worst she had ever experienced in all her 19 years of being a judge.
She knew, and the horror that that child suffered, and she already had a life where she was born with challenges regarding her physical and her mental disabilities.
While killing the mother of both little Ronnie and Ron Nevea right before their eyes. The horror of that alone was enough to scar a child for life, especially Ron Nevea, who was born with challenges already. To make matters worse, he struck the little girl with a hatchet, and all she could do was shed a tear. Judge Sisko spoke with such pain and anger that you could even see she was almost crying while speaking. All that Ronnie did was just at the end of every sentence the judge made. The last thing that little Ron Nevea felt before she left this earth was the cruelty of her father's betrayal.
I'm going to sentence you on the attempted murder, adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to life in prison, running consecutive to counts 2 and consecutive to count 1. On count 4, on the arson, first-degree dwelling, I will adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to 30 years Florida State Prison to run consecutive to counts 1, 2, and 3. On count 5, aggravated child abuse, I'm going to adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to 30 years in the Florida State Prison to run consecutive to counts 1 through 4. On count 6, I'm going to adjudicate you guilty to aggravated child abuse, sentence you to 30 years in prison to run consecutive to counts 1 through 5. And on count 7, resisting arrest without violence, I will adjudicate you guilty, sentence you to time served. Credit for time served is 1,224 days. You have 30 days to appeal the judgment and sentence of the court. Thank you. We're concluded.
While delivering 6 counts of punishments to the prosecuted, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This sentence was repeated 3 times, making it 3 life sentences. He was also given 30 years imprisonment for assaulting a child on 2 different occasions, making it a total of 60 years imprisonment. Then, finally, for resisting arrest without violence, this was nothing compared to the other charges and counts he faced, so it was really not necessary. And then the judge ended the hearing. Carrie Lloyd, who was literally in tears for the majority of her testimony over the death of her lovely daughter Kenyatta Barron and her granddaughter Ron Nevaeh, stated to the court that she was disappointed by the jury's decision to draft life sentences for the killer instead of giving him a brutal life sentence, as he even deserved a punishment worse than death, if there's anything possibly worse than death. Amber Pereira. Young people don't take the caution that states, "Don't drink and drive." And in this case, it has cost Amber her entire life, as she did not only drink and drive, but furthermore killed an entire family on the spot. The Felipek family, consisting of Louise Felipek, Rita Felipek, and their 8-year-old daughter, Georgia Felipek, all died on the Selman Expressway as a result of Amber's drunk driving. Knowing she was in for it and was pretty much screwed at this point, Amber put up a defense that she was experiencing a seizure when the accident happened and could not control herself when the accident occurred. But her prosecutors accused her of being drunk while driving, which was exactly what had happened. When she saw she was losing it, she then pleaded guilty to the court and requested a 20-year imprisonment sentence. But the judge was pretty strict and surprised the entire court with his sentence.
Yes, ma'am, your life is ruined, but you also ruined a lot of lives and ended 3 lives.
Christopher Sabella made sure he held his every word and was not lenient in passing out judgment to Amber based on what she had done. At a point, it wasn't even about the drunk driving or the lives lost, but the pain she had caused the families of those affected. Christopher Sabella made a reference to a statement she made while she was still in a jailhouse, when she said her life was ruined. He then reminded her and said, "You're correct. Your life is ruined, but you also ruined a lot of lives and then ended 3 lives also."
Knowing that she has now lost her life.
The prosecutors demanded that she be thrown in jail for life, while the defense pleaded for a 20-year sentence. But Christopher Sabella had other ideas and then found a balance between the life imprisonment plea and the 20-year plea. As a result of that, he gave Amber a sentence of 50 years, which is more or less the same thing as a life sentence. Amber was shattered, but it was a result of her actions and carelessness. But she wasn't the only one shattered as a result of it all. In general, there were several individuals affected by the accident, but it affected no one like Tracy Kelly, who would have wished that she died in the crash. Tracy Kelly was another person involved in the deadly crash, but she survived and didn't lose her life. But even with that, her life as she knew it had come to an end, as she continues to be in intense pain and suffering. She was in the 3rd vehicle affected, but didn't lose her life, like the Felipeks did. But even with that, she lives every day as if she's dying. The sentence given by the judge gave her a bit of closure, as she stated.
And that she will spend her days in pain. Just her not being happy every day brings joy to me.
Tracy said to the news that knowing she was going to spend the rest of her life in pain and that she was not going to be happy anymore brought joy to her well-being. The father of Rita and the grandfather of their little girl who died in the crash was also so emotional when he came up to the stand. He felt so terrible and could not help but shed tears while testifying. He told Amber that she could never repay him for what she had cost him, and he could not pay her back for what she had done. It was all emotions, with the father of the deceased, as he said he could never forgive her before leaving the stand drenched in tears. Stephen Lorenzo. In this somewhat weird and abysmal case, Stephen Lorenzo was being tried for a crime he committed well over 20 years ago against two men in 2003, where he allegedly murdered two men, Jason Galehouse and Michael Wachholtz. On back-to-back days, both men went missing from the Tampa club and were not found alive anymore. What's crazier, the prosecutor pleaded guilty and requested that he be sentenced to death.
In this lifetime, I'm the bad guy, you're the good guy. Maybe the next lifetime the role will be reversed, who knows. But I want to let you know that I wish you all well.
Before the sentencing took place, the state attorneys had some family members from Jason Galehouse's family who wanted to speak, but they decided not to anymore. Just then, Lorenzo raised his hand to say something to the court. He went on to thank everyone, including the prosecutors, by telling them that they did their job and did it well, stating that in this lifetime, he was the bad guy and they were the good guys. In the next lifetime, when there's a rebirth, it might be the other way around. At this point, he was beginning to sound like a psychopath, but the court gave him the floor to talk. When the mothers of both the victims of Lorenzo came on to speak earlier that month, Mrs. Ruth Wachholtz, the mother of Michael Wachholtz, and then Mrs. Pam Williams, the mother of Jason Galehouse. There was one thing that the pair kept hammering on, and that was the fact that they had been waiting for justice for quite some time now. A wholesome 2 decades they had long waited for, but now they wait no more. Mrs. Pam Williams faced Lorenzo and told him, from one Italian to another, to condono a morte, which translates to, I sentence you, Mr. Lorenzo, to death, as they felt that was the only penalty that was best for a man capable of portraying such heinous crimes. What were the crimes, you'd ask? He kidnapped Jason Galehouse and Michael Wachholtz. As if kidnapping them wasn't enough, he assaulted them both mercilessly before proceeding to R-word both men. He didn't stop there, as he proceeded to murder and mutilate both men. Dude was really crazy, but then, after 20 whole years, justice caught up with him.
The thing that was consistent in their testimony was that they have been waiting 20 years for justice. Today, that long wait ends.
This was the most shocking part of the entire hearing. Even as many expected the sentence to be a death sentence, it was a real bummer that the prosecutor was actually asking for the death sentence, which took everyone aback, even the judge. But Judge Sabella remained unfazed and continued to listen to all the accused had to say as he stated his reasons for asking to be killed instead of being in jail. While still perching on the concept of reincarnation, he told the judge that he wanted the death sentence so he could leave this world and find another body to come back to this world with, while stating, that's how it works, and that's how everything is. We are spiritual beings, and we have to leave this body eventually and come back with another, telling the judge that he's just trying to speed up the process. 20 years passed, and there possibly isn't any form of remorse to be shown over the remains of dead people who have rotted long ago, as he just spoke so freely to the judge. Albert Perkins, who was also a victim of Lorenzo but lived to tell the tale as he managed to escape when Lorenzo fell asleep, said to the hearing that he was drugged and kidnapped by Lorenzo. By the time he could open his eyes, he was already bound and was being tortured by Lorenzo. He stated that Lorenzo was always abducting gay men to use as sex slaves. Well, after his statement and pleading for a death sentence, Judge Sabella let him know he wasn't having any of it, and his testament was going to do him no good if he was trying to play some kind of reverse psychology on him or something. He was going to judge accordingly, and that was giving the most accurate sentence. He sentenced Lorenzo to death ultimately and ended the court session with a parting word: "May God have mercy on your soul." To which the prosecuted replied, "My soul's fine." Mark Sievers, dated the 28th of June, 2015, while Teresa Sievers was enjoying a peaceful day in her home, located in Bonita Springs, Florida, two men broke into the house and murdered her in the most brutal way possible by using a hammer to bludgeon her 17 times until she died. 6 months later, police arrested the two men who carried out the murder, Curtis Wayne Wright Jr. and Jimmy J. Rogers, both from Missouri. Wondering what Mark Sievers had to do with the crime, right? Well, I'll let you in on it. He was the one who masterminded everything that happened. And yes, contracted the killers who murdered his wife in their home. She was actually returning home from a family vacation as she was returning alone to a house that she thought was empty. Unknown to her, two men were waiting to murder her. As she pulled up in the driveway, she brought her luggage out of the vehicle and began making her way inside the house. When she got to the kitchen, that was when the two men attacked her, plunging a hammer into her head until she died. It was stated that her husband, Mark, had been planning it for a while, some weeks to be precise, when he traveled to Missouri for Curtis's wedding. Curtis then recruited Jay Rogers, promising him some part of the money from what Mark was going to give him. He probably didn't believe in his marriage and trust his wife completely. The whole motive was life insurance money and the fear that Teresa would take their children away. This would have shown that the couple was having issues between one another, but whatever it is, it still does not warrant taking someone's life, let alone your wife, whom you wedded in holy matrimony. Leaving your kids without a mother was the most stupid thing he could do, but that was just the least of everything, as he got a more terrible sentence than he was hoping for. Plus, he promised to give Curtis $100,000 from the life insurance money, and it was from that money that Curtis hired Rogers to be his buddy, promising him spoils from after the dreaded event. Mark Sievers, Curtis Wayne Wright, and Jimmy J. Rogers were all convicted of murder, be it first degree or second degree. Rogers' girlfriend was the Oliver Twist to the entire case, as she spilled the beans to the police about her boyfriend admitting to killing the medical personnel, and all investigations and interrogations led to discovering the truth and apprehending the culprits. You'd think that since Mark didn't actively participate in the murder of his wife, he would not get a harsh sentence. But then think again. He had the worst punishments of the three men. The 12 jurors would have to come to an agreed decision to sentence Mark to death if that's what they wanted. And yes, they wanted a death sentence instead of a life sentence. Even as it was looking likely that he would get a life sentence, but it took the jury 4 hours to decide, and Judge Kyle sentenced Mark Sievers to death. There was an obvious relief on the face of the siblings and family of Teresa as they could finally put the case behind them and try to move on with their lives. When justice is not served, it troubles and disturbs the minds of the affected, and it's been 4 years since her death. And finally, justice was served to the pleasing of everyone except the man who got the death sentence, though. Furthermore, Teresa's mother got custody of both kids, who are now orphans due to the greediness and ruthlessness of their father, who could have taken a better approach to his marital issues than taking the life of his wife.
It's the order of the court that she be sentenced to death, sir.
While both Mark Sievers' daughters stated that they do not want their dad to be killed, the judge stated that he would put that into consideration. But in the end, he decided to go ahead with the jury's decision to sentence Mark to death, turning 2 little girls into orphans before they even hit puberty. Cases out there are sure to give you the creeps and the fright of life. But that's life, and life just has to happen. Some humans are pretty much not human. Let me know which one of these cases was the most dreaded for you and who you would have given a lighter punishment or perhaps a worse punishment.
I told her that if she said anything, that I would do something to her parents. And if I was in jail, I would have my friends to do it.
Michael Webb. In May 2019, an ordinary evening walk in Fort Worth, Texas, twisted into a nightmare. A mother and her 8-year-old daughter were strolling through their neighborhood, enjoying the warm night air when a car pulled up and abruptly stopped. Without warning, Michael Webb reached out, seized the little girl, and yanked her into the vehicle. The mother, screaming and clawing at the car, fought desperately to save her child, but Webb sped away, leaving the stunned woman behind, her pleas for help echoing through the quiet street. The community's sense of security shattered instantly, and everyone feared the worst.
Help me! Help me, please! My daughter just got kidnapped!
Surveillance video captured the moment Salem was taken Saturday evening. Police say her mother jumped into the suspect's car, frantically trying to save her.
The kidnapping triggered a relentless search effort. Phones buzzed with Amber Alerts. Neighbors gathered to distribute flyers, and police officers fanned out across Fort Worth, determined to bring the child home. Hours turned into a tense race against time. At first, every lead hit a dead end. Then, a crucial tip directed investigators to a nondescript motel. Inside one of its cramped rooms, Webb believed he had outwitted them. He tucked the terrified girl into a small laundry basket and warned her to keep silent. When officers knocked the first time, they saw nothing out of place and left empty-handed, a grim frustration hanging over their efforts. But a few hours later, they returned with force. They broke down the door and searched every corner. Lifting a pile of clothes, an officer found her, alive, shaking, yet incredibly brave. Outside, the mother collapsed in tears when she heard her daughter's voice. The entire scene, captured by police body cam footage, showed officers rushing the child to safety.
Yes. Hey, buddy.
With the victim safe and Webb behind bars, the case surged through the courts. Evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage linked Webb's car to the abduction, and his confession to investigators sealed his fate. Prosecutors emphasized the cruelty of the act, ripping a child away from her mother's side on a peaceful evening stroll, and the unimaginable terror the girl endured. The defense had little ground to stand on. In the jury's eyes, there was no ambiguity, no doubt. Guilty. The judge then handed down a sentence that matched the severity of the crime: life in prison without the possibility of parole. This was a punishment that left no room for leniency, one that reflected society's absolute intolerance for crimes against children. On the day of sentencing, the family wept softly in the courtroom. Though their wounds would take time to heal, they knew Webb would never again threaten another child's safety. The community, still scarred by the event, found a measure of closure in the harsh sentence. This was not just justice served, it was justice roaring back with uncompromising force.
The man accused of kidnapping 13-year-old Jamie Kloss after killing her parents in their Barron home had his preliminary hearing this morning.
Jake Patterson. In October 2018, the stillness of rural Wisconsin was shattered with unspeakable violence. 13-year-old Jamie Kloss awoke to the sound of her dog barking, and moments later, a stranger, Jake Patterson, pounded on the family's front door. He had planned every detail so meticulously that he left not a single strand of hair or drop of DNA behind. Patterson burst inside, shot Jamie's father, and then marched through the house, finding her mother in a bathroom, shielding Jamie with her own body. What happened next forever scarred a quiet American town. He murdered Jamie's mother right before the teenager's eyes, then ripped the trembling girl from everything she knew and forced her into his waiting car. It was all over in minutes. A carefully rehearsed nightmare had come horrifyingly true. For the next 88 days, Jamie lived in pure terror. Patterson held her captive under a bed in a cramped, remote cabin deep in the Wisconsin woods. He threatened her constantly, warning her not to cry out or attempt any escape. Weeks turned into months, and outside that darkened room, an entire nation searched desperately. Posters plastered highway rest stops and small-town diners. News anchors repeated her name night after night, a prayer for her safe return. Meanwhile, Jamie counted heartbeats and tried not to lose hope. In early January 2019, fate finally offered her a door to freedom. Patterson decided he needed a new job and left the cabin to apply. This one lapse, leaving her alone, was all Jamie needed. Barefoot, half frozen by the frigid Wisconsin winter, she ran into the cold air, pushing forward despite fear and pain. She encountered a woman walking a dog. That neighbor recognized Jamie immediately from the widely circulated photographs. Within minutes, the police swarmed in, and Patterson, returning to find his prisoner gone, was arrested not far from the very spot he had once felt so confident no one would ever find him.
Case involving the 14-year-old girl, referring to Jamie Kloss, who Patterson was convicted of kidnapping the same day he murdered her parents.
In the courtroom, Patterson broke down. He pleaded guilty and offered tears and vague remorse, but no explanation could justify the horror he unleashed. The prosecutors read a statement from Jamie, who chose not to face him directly. Her words cut through the silence. This man stole her innocence, shattered her family, and made the world feel unsafe in a way she could never have imagined. Sitting stoically, the judge considered the staggering brutality of Patterson's crimes and the nightmare Jamie endured. The sentence left no doubt. 2 life terms, ensuring he would never walk free again, plus additional decades for good measure. Patterson would spend his life in prison without a single glimpse of ordinary freedom. This was not just a punishment. It was a declaration that no mercy would be shown to a man who had hunted a childlike prey.
Before I did this, I planned on taking multiple girls, killing multiple families. I wanted to treat them differently, play mind games with them.
When the gavel finally dropped, the community exhaled, wounded but relieved. Jamie had survived against all odds. Her courage, resilience, and daring escape became symbols of hope in a story that, for too long, had been defined by violence. Patterson's life sentence wasn't just retribution, it was a warning to anyone who might believe they could steal a child from her home and rewrite her fate. The entire nation, which had followed the case with a collective, trembling heart, now saw justice done. Jamie would have a chance to heal, supported by a community that had never given up on her. In that healing process, there was a lesson for everyone. Even in the darkest corners, the human spirit can endure. And when evil tries to slip away, the legal system can roar back with a sentence so severe, it leaves no room for doubt. Patterson's life behind bars would serve as a reminder that preying on the vulnerable invites the harshest reckoning imaginable.
Why did you do it? The sister of the 21-year-old church massacre madman was supposed to get married this weekend.
Dylan Roof. On the evening of June 17, 2015, Dylan Roof walked into Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and joined a Bible study group. For nearly an hour, he sat with the group, pretending to participate in the session. Then, in an act of unthinkable violence, he pulled out a .45 caliber Glock pistol and opened fire on the group, killing 9 parishioners, including the church's pastor, Clementa Pinckney. Roof's motives were explicitly rooted in white supremacist ideology. A chilling manifesto found later detailed his desire to incite a race war. The massacre sent shockwaves through the nation, highlighting the lingering scars of racism in America. Survivors and families were left devastated, with the church community and the entire country grappling with the horror of the attack. Within hours of the shooting, Roof was identified as the suspect, thanks to surveillance footage and witness descriptions. A manhunt ensued, and he was apprehended the next morning during a traffic stop in Shelby, North Carolina. Roof confessed to the shooting during an interrogation, showing no remorse and openly discussing his intentions. The brazen admission further fueled outrage and grief.
Do you know where they're possibly at now?
They just passed Carter Chevrolet going towards,
Let me tell my officers right quick.
I know it's tough sometimes to...
Roof's trial began in 2016 and was marked by highly emotional testimonies. Survivors, including Polly Shepard, who had been spared by Roof to tell the world what happened, recounted the harrowing events of that evening. Families of the victims gave heart-wrenching statements about their loss. Some expressed their grief through forgiveness, while others demanded justice with raw, searing anger. In a shocking decision, Roof chose to represent himself during the sentencing phase, refusing legal counsel. This led to awkward and unsettling moments in court, where he showed no remorse, reiterating his belief in his actions. He delivered chilling, emotionless statements, further alienating himself from even the slightest sympathy. Courtroom reactions were deeply emotional, as family members recounted their losses and expressed their grief. A particularly notable moment occurred when Nadine Collier, daughter of victim Ethel Lance, addressed Roof directly, stating, "I forgive you. You took something very precious from me. I will never talk to her again, but I forgive you."
And that we will be okay. She's in a better place now, that we all trying to get there.
After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just a few hours before finding Roof guilty on all 33 federal charges, including hate crimes, murder, and obstruction of religious freedom. The sentencing phase began soon after, with the prosecution arguing for the death penalty. The defense, meanwhile, attempted to portray Roof as a troubled young man driven by delusions, though this argument failed to gain traction. In January 2017, the jury unanimously sentenced Dylan Roof to death. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read. Families of the victims embraced each other, some crying tears of relief, while Roof sat emotionless, his face a blank slate, seemingly unfazed by the decision.
Dylan Roof, the suspect in the shooting spree at a South Carolina church that claimed 9 lives, was charged with 9 counts of murder on Friday.
Roof's case marked the first time in U.S. history that a person was sentenced to death for federal hate crimes. While some viewed the death sentence as a fitting punishment for his heinous act, others criticized it as inconsistent with the forgiveness many victims' families had offered. The case reignited debates over the death penalty, racism, and gun control in America. The Charleston church shooting remains a painful reminder of the consequences of unchecked hate and racism. Roof's sentence sent a strong message that such acts of violence would face the harshest possible punishment, but it also left scars on a community and a nation still struggling to heal.
This after video footage of a former sheriff's deputy allegedly planting evidence was released. As we told you last week, Zach Wester has been fired.
Zachary Wester. For a time, Deputy Zachary Wester of Florida's Jackson County Sheriff's Office was celebrated as a fearless officer who kept drugs off the streets. Arrest after arrest, he hauled supposed traffickers and users to jail, building a reputation as a staunch enforcer of the law. But then the cracks began to show. People he stopped swore they were clean, insisting they had never touched drugs. They demanded to know why baggies of narcotics magically appeared in their cars after Wester pulled them over. Their pleas sounded like desperate lies, until body cam footage revealed something chilling. Wester was seen holding suspicious baggies before discovering them on his stops. Suddenly, the hero cop looked more like a puppet master, planting evidence to create crimes where none existed. As whispers grew into open accusations, Internal Affairs launched a probe. They searched Wester's patrol car trunk and found a stash of illegal drugs, ready-made props for his next roadside bust. One by one, the pieces fell into place. People who had been arrested lost their jobs, their children, and their reputations. Some even served time, all based on fabricated charges. The outrage was immediate and intense. Prosecutors had no choice but to drop more than 100 cases connected to Wester, admitting they could no longer trust the evidence he presented. Those wrongfully accused demanded their records be cleared and their lives restored. This was no mere misconduct. This was a deliberate violation of public trust.
This is a case about an abuse of an incredible power. The defendant used his position as a deputy sheriff to make traffic stops on 12 members of this community and plant methamphetamine in their cars.
In court, the victims took the stand and described what Wester had stolen from them: livelihoods, custody of their children, and their good names. The defense tried to salvage Wester's image, painting him as a dedicated public servant who went astray. But surveillance videos and his hidden stash of contraband told a darker story. Jurors didn't flinch. They convicted Wester on multiple counts of official misconduct and other charges. He had betrayed the very people he had sworn to protect. When the sentencing day arrived, the judge left no room for sympathy. 12 years in prison for an officer who had weaponized his badge against the innocent. And then came a measure of restitution a $1 million settlement for his victims, a sum that acknowledged the immense harm they had suffered. In that courtroom, a message rang loud and clear. Corruption under the color of law would be met with severe, unforgiving consequences.
Mr. Williams, I've explained this to you 3 or 4 times now as far as why that is not on the video.
In the wake of Wester's conviction, Jackson County residents wrestled with anger and a renewed skepticism toward law enforcement. The revelations shook their faith, reminding everyone that a uniform does not guarantee integrity. In response, the sheriff's office promised reforms, better training, more oversight, and accountability systems to prevent another Wester from exploiting the badge. Public meetings are filled with heated questions and demands for transparency. While no amount of sentencing or compensation could fully restore what had been taken from the victims, seeing the ex-deputy behind bars offered some solace. Wayne Jenkins. Baltimore had hoped its elite gun trace task force would bring order to streets flooded with illegal firearms. Instead, this special unit became a criminal enterprise wearing badges. Under the command of Sergeant Wayne Jenkins, these officers weren't just cutting corners, they were openly violating the very laws they'd sworn to uphold. They stole cash from drug dealers and innocent citizens alike, planted narcotics as evidence to secure convictions, and penned falsified reports to hide their crimes. Their methods went beyond corruption. They resembled tactics employed by organized crime rings, all while wearing the uniform of public servants. The recklessness of Jenkins and his crew knew few limits. They brazenly robbed suspects at gunpoint, shaking them down under the cover of official police work. During one high-speed chase, their pursuit led to the death of an innocent bystander, a fatal reminder that their actions weren't victimless. It was only a matter of time before honest officers and federal investigators pierced through the blue wall of silence. Whistleblowers came forward and the FBI dug deep, unmasking a level of corruption that stunned even seasoned agents. The scale of deception, tens of thousands of dollars stolen, countless drugs resold on the streets, and sham reports filed was nearly impossible to fathom.
There's Detective Graham. He pulled out the handgun and the cocaine. Just like clear the plot.
Officers, not white shirts, in police reports because you don't want to inconvenience them.
Cornered by overwhelming evidence, Wayne Jenkins pleaded guilty. In court, he tried to show remorse, breaking down as he confessed to betraying the trust of his community. But the gravity of his crimes was immense. The judge delivered a stern sentence, 25 years in federal prison. Other members of the task force also found themselves stripped of their badges and locked behind bars. The city, already grappling with distrust and tension between law enforcement and citizens, felt its wounds deepen. Every headline and every detail of the trial reminded residents how a group of officers had twisted their authority into a weapon of greed and fear. The aftermath forced Baltimore to confront uncomfortable truths. People who had been wrongfully arrested or had money stolen by these rogue officers won multi-million-dollar settlements, yet no amount of compensation could fully repair the damage. Parents had to explain to children that not every officer is a hero, and neighborhoods once open to community policing initiatives recoiled in suspicion. Local officials promised reforms, more oversight, stricter accountability measures, body cameras, but the road to restoring faith would be long and uphill. Elsewhere in the country, law enforcement agencies watched with a mix of horror and resolve. This scandal exposed how a few bad officers, if left unchecked, could erode public trust, undermine legitimate crime-fighting efforts, and turn courts into theaters of injustice. The lesson was clear. Even those with badges, guns, and power must face consequences if they abandon their oaths for personal gain. Hunter Elward. In January 2023, 6 Mississippi law enforcement officers, infamously nicknamed the Goon Squad, violated the sanctity of a home in ways that defy belief. They stormed into a residence without a warrant, confronting 2 black men who had been doing nothing more than living their lives. What followed was not just an arrest or a misguided search, it was an extended ritual of cruelty. The officers hurled racial slurs, beat their victims relentlessly, subjected them to sexual humiliation, and even threatened to kill them. At one point, they poured cooking oil, syrup, and eggs over the men, laughing as if torment were a sport. To cover their tracks, the officers snatched up the home's security footage, tossing it into a river. Yet, darkness does not protect those who commit atrocities under the badge.
Can you imagine the abject terror those two victims must have felt?
The victims testified that the officers treated them like less than human, shocking them with tasers while mocking their pain. Guns were pointed at heads, threats were made, and the perpetrators seemed to revel in the agony they inflicted. Over time, their walls of denial crumbled. Confronted by the severity of their crimes and the mounting evidence, these so-called protectors pleaded guilty to an array of federal civil rights violations and related offenses: obstruction, assault, and conspiracy. Their uniform status could not mask the truth that they had become violent criminals in every sense of the word.
You understand this court's not bound by any plea bargaining agreement to impose the maximum sentence here. You also understand that I accept your plea.
The victims faced their tormentors in court, speaking about the ordeal that had ripped apart their sense of safety and dignity. Meanwhile, the officers, men who once wore badges, stood teary-eyed and trembling, awaiting their fate. The judge did not hesitate. Sentences ranged from 10 to 40 years, ensuring that these men would spend a significant portion of their lives behind bars. Families of the victims left the courtroom with complex emotions. There was relief that justice had been done, but the scars, both physical and psychological, would never fade. This was not merely a verdict against a few rogue officers. It was a thunderous declaration that the justice system refuses to tolerate heinous acts committed under the guise of law enforcement.
Sentencing for the former Mississippi law enforcement officers who tortured and abused two black men. They will spend years behind bars. Faith Abubi has the story. Good morning, Faith.
The revelations unleashed a wave of outrage and debate. Jesse Elbis Dayordi shining a harsh spotlight on systemic issues of racism and abuse of power. The community demanded answers and reforms, forcing an introspection into the nature of policing and the safeguards meant to prevent such horrors. Local leaders and national figures weighed in, insisting this case stand as a marker. The message was brutally clear: a badge is no shield against prosecution. The victims, though forever changed, found some measure of closure in knowing their attackers would never again wear a uniform or wield unchecked authority. Across the country, law enforcement agencies took note. Training, supervision, and accountability measures faced renewed scrutiny. The Goon Squad name would go down in infamy. A reminder that no matter how deep the corruption or cruelty, there is a line that cannot be crossed without dire consequences. In the end, this trial and sentencing proved that even the strongest blue walls crumble before undeniable truth, and that courts will strip away the uniform to reveal the criminal underneath. Such brutality would not go unanswered, and the legal system had the final, unmistakable word. From child abductors and domestic terrorists to corrupt cops and brutal torturers, these cases show that justice can wield unforgiving strength. Each sentence, whether countless life terms or decades behind bars, becomes a warning to anyone who inflicts unimaginable harm.
I would submit that this case is probably the most difficult and shocking case that this county in St. Johns County has.
Aiden Fucci, only 14 years old at the time, brutally murdered his 13-year-old classmate from Patriots Oak Academy. He reportedly stabbed her a staggering 114 times before abandoning her body in the woods where it was later found. Following his arrest, Fucci was seen recording videos from the backseat of a police car and posting them on Snapchat.
We're having fun in a f***ing cop car.
Yep. Tristan.
What's up, guys?
Tristan, if you f***ing walk out the damn... When you see this in a month...
Later on, a video surfaced online, on Snapchat to be precise, where his parents were talking with him in an interrogation room, telling him that what he did was not even smart and was totally dumb. But they failed to use the right word, which was that he was a wicked and heartless person, stabbing a fellow human being 114 times. He pretty much just sat there, listening to them as he knew what he was into already. They also informed him that he was all over the news, which I'm sure he probably knew about already, as the evidence exposed him completely.
It's all over, you're all over the internet everywhere. Social media.
It is on social media. You'll probably come stay with me after we get done with this. Just for your well-safe being.
This is serious.
It was well about hours after the parents of the deceased discovered that their daughter was missing at this point, and then decided to file a complaint. Since she was still a minor, it wasn't hard to declare her missing, and the search for the little girl began. Little did they know that she was dead already. The body of the 13-year-old was found on Mother's Day, the 9th of May, 2021, and her body was found in the worst state, as she had been stabbed and slashed by her killer, severally, in a pretty brutal and inhumane manner. You'd come to wonder what a 13-year-old would have done to deserve this kind of savage treatment.
How far did you go in school?
To 8th grade.
Are you able to read, write, speak, and understand the English language?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you under the influence of any medication, drugs?
Prosecutors presented a chilling video that allegedly showed Aiden Fucci walking with the girl shortly before her murder. In the same footage, Fucci was seen running away from the area where her body was later discovered, roughly 90 minutes after they had entered the location together. The victim's body was found with 114 stab wounds, including 49 defensive wounds, 35 to the head, 35 to the neck, 29 to the back and shoulders, and 6 fatal injuries. A truly horrifying scene. With all this overwhelming evidence, there was no hiding place for Fucci, as he had been caught red-handed already. In the state of all that, he had no other choice but to plead guilty because, yes, he was guilty, while pleading guilty to first-degree murder and awaiting the decision of the judge. It was pretty obvious and evident that this was going to be a strict sentence, but something to consider was the fact that he was a minor. Normally, an adult would immediately get a death sentence due to the gravity and heartlessness of the case, but his age earned him a bit of leverage as he was given a life sentence by the judge and also was given the chance to be able to review his sentence in the next 25 years, which is more like a guaranteed 25 years imprisonment and then a review that may see his life sentence terminated and he be set free instead.
I just want to say I plead out guilty, and that I'm sorry for the Bailey family and my family.
Okay. I'm sure that there'll be an opportunity, obviously, at sentencing hearings.
When it was Alexis's turn to climb the stands to say something, she brought a glass jar and then she calculatedly dropped 114 aqua stone hearts into it, signifying the amount of stabs her sister had to endure before she died. Should have been a whole lot of pain one wouldn't even want to imagine. Try to think if she was alive for all of the 114 stabs. That's the real torture there. The jar was there for all the family members. When they came on to say something, they would place a white stone into the jar, a testament that was filled with all manner of emotions, but then ended in sorrow and anger, knowing the little girl was gone. While Fucci hadn't said why he chose to kill her, since they were attending the same school and were friends also. Some of his friends said he had a weird fascination with knives, and he just wanted to kill someone.
Not many know what Forrest and I faced during our pregnancy with Tristan. We were moving to another country, Singapore, when I found out I was expecting another child.
You expect the mother of the deceased to be the most hurt of everyone, and yes, that was exactly the case. A mother losing her child is the worst thing any mother would ever imagine. She made a statement to the judge stating, "Do not think he can be saved by rehabilitation. This is beyond saving," she said to the judge. But when you think about it, what would be going through the mind of a 13-year-old who got stabbed by a trusted friend 100 times and more without stopping? The thought of the scene traumatized Stacy, and she told Fucci, "You have brought pain on me, my family, her friends, and our entire community," since they were basically neighbors.
For me, I have always loved being a mother and vowed endlessly to love, teach, and protect my children. I spent so many weeks traveling with Tristan for cheer over the years.
When the father had the chance to speak, he wasted no time in immediately facing Fucci and letting him know that his insincere apology was not accepted at all. It was basically all emotions for him, as he stated all the horrors and pain he had been going through since his daughter's passing, the amount of money spent on therapy, and losing a sense of himself, specifically stating an event the entire family had every Sunday, Bailey Family Fun Day. But we both can agree that it wouldn't be the same again, knowing that the event could never be the same again. To cut the long story short, a really emotional moment from all members of the entire family, including older brother Tegan and Brittany, where Tegan saw his sister the day he came home to celebrate Mother's Day. They watched TV together before he went in, only to go wake her up on Mother's Day and find her room empty. He really couldn't forgive Fucci, and Brittany was on her honeymoon when she got the call about her sister, who was missing, and later on confirmed dead.
I, however, failed in one lesson. I did not know that I needed to teach Tristan to be afraid of the evil in her own school.
A really sad day for a really large family, as Fucci succeeded in breaking an entire family. A really large one at that. It's really hard to think that any one of them would even consider forgiving the culprit. After his sentence, though, it was pretty hard to see if the kiddo felt bad for what he had done, or if it was just an obvious case of, I am proud of what I just did, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat, as the brother just stood there unmoved and unfazed.
God! 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 God!
Damon Kemp. The case of Damon Kemp, a teenager accused of murdering his friends in Daytona Beach, Florida in 2018, is both shocking and deeply puzzling. What makes this story particularly disturbing is the absence of the usual red flags that might hint at such a tragic outcome. Damon Kemp was known as a straight-A student, a devoted son, and a trusted friend. So, what could have driven him to commit such a horrifying act in December 2018? On December 7th, 2018, Damon approached police officers who were investigating a reported home invasion in Daytona Beach. Visibly distressed and gasping for air, he made a shocking admission: "I killed my friend." Stunned by his confession, officers immediately took him into custody. However, Damon offered no additional information, leaving investigators to unravel the grim sequence of events. 15 hours after Damon Kemp's shocking confession, the investigation led police to an apartment at 434 Jimmy Ann Drive. There, they discovered a bullet hole in the door, a shell casing nearby, and the lifeless bodies of Trey Ingram and Jordan Patton inside. Both 19 years old, the victims had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. Trey Ingram, affectionately known as Ace, was a local amateur boxer and former high school football star. A student at Bethune-Cookman University, he was working on returning to school. Jordan Patton, Trey's childhood friend since elementary school, shared a close bond with him. Quincy, a friend Damon had met at Bethune-Cookman University, shed light on Damon's alarming behavior in the weeks leading up to the murders. He described Damon as increasingly paranoid and erratic, frequently expressing fears that people were out to harm him. Damon's actions became so unsettling that at one point he attempted to crawl into bed with Quincy out of sheer fear. On the night of December 7th, Quincy drove Damon to Trey's apartment. Around 1:50 a.m., another resident, Korea Maktar, opened his door to find Damon pointing a firearm at him. Korea managed to calm Damon down enough to shut the door and call the police. This led to the police arriving at the scene, where Damon made his shocking confession. He shouted and made incoherent statements, leading many to speculate whether he was mentally ill or under the influence of substances at the time of the crime. His screams and shouts were really weird, as they were giving drug addict and I'm high on something, making one think he probably was on something prior to that time. As I have stated before, a few days after his arrest, Damon Kemp admitted during a jail phone call that he had been under the influence of substances at the time of the crime. He recalled only smoking weed, but suggested it might have been laced with something else. While Damon denied having any history of mental illness, he was placed in the psychiatric unit of the jail. Following his conviction, he wasn't a minor, so it made his sentence somewhat easier, as any harsh punishment could be given without any sort of consideration, even a death sentence. I believe one saving grace Damon had was the fact that he was suspected of being on drugs or any sort of extra substance that altered his actions. Damon was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The fact that he went to a police officer to actually confess his crimes and all of that, one might try to even say that he was probably high or something, but it's pretty hard to say when his handprints were found on the gun that actually killed his friends.
That indeed. I tell you, deputies haven't yet released the motive behind the shooting, but right now, as Kemp is sitting behind bars, 2 families are planning funerals. Just a very sad story, Eric.
During the sentencing, the judge highlighted the gravity of the crime and the devastating impact it had on the families of Trey Ingram and Jordan Patton. In his remarks, the judge emphasized the profound loss of 2 young lives and the enduring pain and suffering endured by their loved ones. Trey's older sister, Laken Goldwire, also spoke and said, Trey was an amazing kid and was loved by all. Furthermore, she went on to state that he was a really mean and wicked person, as he took the goodness of 2 individuals who loved him and wanted to help him and murdered them in cold blood. She made a statement, and it was a pretty resounding one. She said, "You shot Trey in his heart, the same organ that was used to create a space for him to know you." That was deep though, very deep, as it seemed rather disturbing for you to hear something like that. Sounds like his soul would be haunted forever. The question of whether Damon Kemp was genuinely experiencing a mental health crisis or simply pretending remains a point of speculation. On one hand, his erratic and paranoid behavior, as reported by Quincy, along with his placement in the psychiatric unit, suggests he may have been struggling with an underlying issue.
In both cases, are you pleading guilty because you are guilty and for no other reason? Guilty, yes. Okay.
Isaac Gonzalez. Isaac Gonzalez, 17, was sentenced to 40 years for murder and 20 years for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, with both sentences to run concurrently under a plea agreement. The decision was finalized last Thursday by 437th District Court Judge Joel Perez. Isaac Gonzalez's careless actions cost a life and inflicted severe injuries. This tragic incident highlights the danger when firearms end up in the hands of children, stated Bexar County Criminal District Attorney Joe Gonzalez. He extended condolences to the family of Navita Putri and expressed hope that the sentence would provide justice to both victims. Although Gonzalez was a minor at the time of the shooting, he was later certified to stand trial as an adult. His warrants were issued on October 20th, 2023.
Like a war zone, with more than 100 shots fired into a home.
The Bexar County Sheriff's Office identified Isaac Gonzalez as a suspect in a drive-by shooting that targeted the wrong house at approximately 12:45 a.m. on October 4th, 2022. Tragically, 25-year-old Novita Brazil was shot in the face while working on her computer in her bedroom and died almost instantly, according to Sheriff Javier Salazar. In addition to Novita's death, another woman, an Airbnb tenant who had just arrived the night before, suffered a gunshot wound to the leg. Around 100 rounds were fired at the home using several different weapons, further highlighting the reckless and deadly nature of the attack.
I'm gonna get another bond too. I'm gonna get another bond.
Deputies arrived at the scene to find one white four-door vehicle speeding away from the area. Authorities were able to stop the vehicle a short time later near Highway 151 and Acme Road and make arrests. Multiple teenagers have been charged in the case, including 15-year-old Renee Gonzalez, who was charged with murder. Gonzalez, who was on the run after his case, didn't stop, where, when he got caught, he taunted police officials on live TV. Bexar County Criminal District Attorney Joe Gonzalez said in his statement, "Our condolences to Novita Putri's family, and may the sentence deliver justice to both parties." Based on the fact that the murder wasn't planned or anything whatsoever, it couldn't really be tied to him as the murderer, but a street shooting gone wrong. Regardless of that, though, he was in possession of some firearms, and several shots were fired. Approximately 100 shots, or even more than that, and it ended the life of a youngster who was just starting her life and was pretty much thinking about how to move to the next stage of her life. He was sentenced to about 40 years in jail, plus another 20 years, which would be served consecutively over counts of murder and another charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in hand.
Murked in court, but pleaded guilty.
While his trial was going on and all the sentences were being passed, Gonzalez also appeared to be smirking in court following his sentence, even after admitting to the crimes he committed. His neighbor, who caught the footage of the shooting, said in an interview that she believes he doesn't realize how much he had hurt a lot of people.
And based on the evidence of the two trials I presided over, there's no doubt that you caused all the death and carnage in this case.
Michael Sykes. Michael Sykes is another case that would continue to baffle many in several years to come. The definition of what a coward is. Michael Sykes was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder when he brutally stabbed 2 of his girlfriend's children to death. Among the 2 kids he stabbed, one of them was his. Ziana Cutler, who was just 1 year old, was not his direct kid but his girlfriend's, with her previous boyfriend perhaps, and then Malia Sykes, a 4-month-old child who was his own, but still did not escape certain death from her father. While we think the only thing he was guilty of was killing Malaya and Ziana, that was not just it. He also attempted to kill a 3rd child, Miracle Cutler, as he also stabbed her mercilessly. But then she showed strength and utter resilience by not dying and staying alive despite her father's strong will to put an end to her life. And that was not just all. He also attempted to end the life of his girlfriend too by stabbing her, but thankfully she survived and was able to drag him to justice in November of 2017. while the murder of Malia and Ziana, then the attempted murder on the third child, Miracle, that survived, all happened on the 10th of February 2016 inside the Ramada Inn that was located at Staten Island. When you thought the case would easily be concluded with Michael Sykes being the abrupt killer and possibly immediately sentenced to any sort of harsh punishment, as he allegedly killed 2 daughters and also killed their mother. Here's the twist. He said he didn't kill his daughters. Michael was a very loving dad to his kids, both the one he had directly with Rebecca and the ones that Rebecca had before they were together. He said Rebecca murdered the 2 girls, and then when he came and saw that, he stabbed Rebecca to death. His mother also confirmed that after the incident happened, he called her with a shaky voice, telling her that he had killed his girlfriend and he wanted to kill himself now. It became really confusing at a point and somehow felt like the defense was trying to manufacture lies to save the skin of the persecuted. What's more, it really made sense seeing that he was not a man of violence and doesn't have any violent record. Gallucci, who was the defense lawyer and the defendant for Michael Sykes, gave his all for this case and even managed to put the court in a difficult situation when he stated that Michael was innocent, repeating that Rebecca killed the little girls and not the father. And come to think about it, I really can't believe that's what happened. And this is just a case of Michael being unlucky and, once again, another case of solid injustice added to the pile of injustice already in the judiciary and legislative system.
Justice should be tempered with mercy. This is not one of those cases.
There was no leniency as to the verdict of all the crimes committed. Even with the claim of Michael Sykes and his defendant Gallucci, the court still had valid evidence that he killed all the affected in that scenario. It's easier to tie a murder to someone who is still alive than one who is already dead, so the claim of Rebecca killing her kids seemed invalid, whereas Michael was possibly jealous that Rebecca was leaving him and going back to her old boyfriend, meaning that he wouldn't get to keep his kids. In frustration and guilt, he left the house of the friend he was staying with, took one of her knives, and headed to carry out the mission in mind. The street footage captured showed his hastiness and panic state as he knew what he had done. His sentence. He was sentenced to prison for life without the option of parole on counts of first-degree murder for Ziana Cutler and another life sentence on the same count for Malia Sykes. He also received a second-degree charge of attempted murder for Miracle, who survived. He got 25 years for that and another 25 years for the murder of Rebecca. All these were expected to run consecutively, as stated by the judge. He also made a statement that would have let Michael know his fate was sealed. The judge said they'd ask us to tamper mercy with justice, but that won't be done here. Was he guilty or innocent? That we don't know, but all we know for sure was that he was involved in murder, and realistically, he'd be pretty inhuman if he really tried to end the lives of his babies.
In count 1, murder, we, the jury, recommend and fix the penalty as death.
Tiffany Moss. Imani Moss, the stepdaughter of Tiffany Moss, died on a Monday morning while she was being starved intentionally by her stepmother, who made sure the 10-year-old child died of starvation and thereafter proceeded to burn the body and bury it to conceal all evidence. The Gwinnett County mother was tried the next day, and the jury decided that she be put to death.
A Gwinnett County stepmother stared straight ahead, briefly looked down for just a moment before she raised her head again, and then
she was convicted of exactly 6 charges in respect to this case: murder, felony murder, cruelty to children, first degree, and concealing the death of another, with counts of felony murder and first degree appearing more than once. The district attorney for Gwinnett County stated that the punishment for this crime had to fit the offense, and in this case, the offense was utterly vile and completely inhuman. Starvation is a form of torture, even more so for a 10-year-old girl. The sentence was fitting and proper for cruelty of such magnitude. The father of Imani, Eman, came up to testify for his wife, and it was really evident that he was trying to cover up for her in order to avoid the death penalty.
Iman allegedly calculated every part of Imani's abuse and death,
while jumping from one story to another, to a new one again, confusing the entire courtroom. But this was a room filled with really intelligent individuals who would not be fooled by the made-up lies. It was a really sad scene also to see the burnt body of little Imani, completely and totally heartbreaking.
Going forward from this point,
In terms of representation, or is there something you need from the court that you don't have?
While Judge George Hutchinson gave Tiffany an opportunity to speak to the court during her death trial, she seemed rather unfazed and had absolutely nothing major to say. As a matter of fact, she was even laughing while she was trying to speak to the judge, showing no sense of remorse or any kind of regret for what she did to her stepdaughter.
Offensive murder as alleged in count 1 was outrageously or wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman in that it involved torture of the victim before death.
George Hutchinson requested the verdict of the jurors on the penalty that Tiffany Moss would face. Of course, it had to be a unanimous decision by all the jurors, and they all decided that she be sentenced to death, which the prosecutor did not flinch at all.
We're returning to 18B 1541-1, State of Georgia versus Tiffany Nicole Moss. The defendant's present along with standby counsel. State's counsel's present as well.
The judge took another 3 minutes to interrogate every single juror whose decision made it to his table, asking if their decision was theirs and if it still remained the same. The jurors all agreed and answered yes, completing and ending a case that seemed like it would take more time than expected.
The only living suspect in the killing of Vanessa Guillen is in court today. Janelle Ford explains the latest and shows us a reminder in Fort Hood for Guillen.
Cecily Aguilar and Aaron Robinson. The tragic death of Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen, a 20-year-old U.S. Army soldier stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, shocked the nation. Her disappearance in April 2020 and the subsequent discovery of her remains in June 2020 brought national attention to issues of sexual harassment, abuse in the military, and the failures in the handling of Guillen's case by military authorities. The case led to one of the heaviest sentences ever given to a person involved in the cover-up of her murder. Vanessa Guillen was stationed at Fort Hood, a massive U.S. Army base in Texas. On April 22, 2020, she vanished after being seen near her unit's headquarters. Her car keys, ID, and other belongings were left behind in the armory, which worried her family. They believed something suspicious had happened. A major investigation began involving the Army, FBI, Texas Rangers, and other agencies. Before her disappearance, Vanessa told her family she was being sexually harassed by a sergeant, but didn't report it out of fear of retaliation. Her undocumented mother also advised caution, making the situation even more stressful. As days passed, with little progress, the family grew frustrated with the Army's lack of answers. Protests erupted outside Fort Hood, and even Congress got involved to demand accountability. On June 30th, human remains were found near the Leon River, leading investigators to Specialist Aaron Robinson, one of the last people seen with Vanessa. His girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, confessed that Robinson had killed Vanessa with a hammer in the armory, and that she helped him dismember and bury the body. When police closed in on Robinson, he took his own life. Vanessa's death shocked the nation and revealed deep issues within military culture, particularly around sexual harassment and safety. Her family's fight for justice inspired widespread protests and calls for change. Her case became a rallying cry for reform, sparking new measures to protect soldiers from harassment and ensure accountability within the military. Guillen's case sparked an national attention, leading to a congressional hearing in July 2020. Her mother, previously detained for immigration issues, was granted parole in place thanks to support from Garcia and an immigration attorney. The case brought up systemic issues, especially regarding harassment in the military. Vanessa Guillen was stationed at Fort Hood, a massive U.S. Army base in Texas covering 340 square miles. She was last seen on April 22, 2020 at 1 p.m. near her unit's parking lot. Her belongings, including her car keys, ID, and barracks key, were left inside the armory where she worked. Her family felt something was wrong, as she wouldn't leave those behind. The U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command, CID, the FBI, and other agencies launched a search, while Fort Hood units scoured the area. Before she disappeared, Guillen confided to her family that a sergeant had been sexually harassing her. Despite encouragement to report it, she feared retaliation. She believed other female soldiers' complaints against the same sergeant had been ignored. Guillen's undocumented mother also worried about drawing attention to their immigration status. By June, her family grew frustrated with the lack of progress. Guillen's mother publicly criticized the Army's investigation, and their attorney, Natalie Kawam, said the family was being kept in the dark. On June 13th, hundreds of protesters gathered outside Fort Hood, demanding answers. The Army claimed there was no evidence of assault, but suspected foul play in Guillen's disappearance. Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia joined the efforts, meeting with officials and helping secure more resources. The investigation involved 300 interviews and over 10,000 hours of work. On June 17th, the League of United Latin American Citizens offered $25,000 to add to the Army's reward for information. Cecily Aguilar's trial, which began in 2022, was a highly emotional event. Her actions in helping Robinson cover up the crime were seen as a significant betrayal of trust, as she was not only involved in the murder, but also tried to erase the evidence by helping to dismember and conceal Guillen's body. In 2023, after months of legal proceedings, Aguilar pleaded guilty to federal charges. In a highly publicized court hearing, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison for her role in the crime. The sentencing was harsh, as it was a clear message that aiding and abetting murder and the cover-up of such a heinous crime would be met with severe punishment. Aguilar's sentence was one of the longest ever given for a civilian who assisted in the cover-up of a military murder. The decision was celebrated by Guillen's family and supporters, as it was seen as a step toward holding all involved accountable. The 30-year sentence was seen as a message that such cruelty would not go unpunished. Aaron Robinson was not sentenced because he died by suicide on June 30th, 2020, as law enforcement attempted to detain him after uncovering evidence linking him to Vanessa Guillen's murder. Robinson fled Fort Hood and shot himself with a handgun before being apprehended. On May 24th, 2022, the Texas Department of Public Safety revealed chilling details about Vanessa Guillen's murder. Cecily Aguilar, who was involved in the case, explained why Army Specialist Aaron Robinson killed Guillen. According to Aguilar, Guillen accidentally saw Robinson's phone lock screen, which displayed a photo of Aguilar. Robinson panicked because Aguilar was married to another soldier, making their relationship a violation of the Army's fraternization rules. Fearing repercussions, Robinson attacked Guillen, striking her in the head with a hammer.
There's relief today as to know that Cecily will finally be held accountable for her actions, although
the case of Vanessa Guillen had a profound impact on military policy and on public awareness of sexual harassment within the armed forces. The investigation into her death led to a broader examination of the military's culture and its treatment of female soldiers. After the case gained national attention, lawmakers passed the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act, which sought to address issues of sexual harassment and assault within the military. The law mandates that sexual harassment complaints in the military be handled outside of the chain of command to protect victims from retaliation and to ensure that investigations are conducted fairly. This act was a significant step toward reforming the military justice system and providing better protection for service members. For Guillen's family, the 30-year sentence for Aguilar was bittersweet. While they appreciated that some measure of justice had been served, the pain of losing Vanessa remained with them. They continued to advocate for greater reforms and for the memory of their daughter to live on through the changes that her case helped inspire. Vanessa Guillen's death and the aftermath of the case continue to influence the fight for justice for military personnel. Her family has used their grief as a platform for advocating for changes in military policies regarding harassment and abuse. Their efforts have led to significant reforms, but their fight is far from over. They continue to press for more accountability within the military and for the voices of service members to be heard. Vanessa Guillen's story remains a powerful reminder of the importance of addressing sexual harassment in the military and holding those who commit crimes accountable, no matter their rank or position. Her death, though tragic, has led to changes that will hopefully prevent future tragedies and ensure that soldiers are treated with dignity and respect. Michael Roy Jones. The murder of 19-year-old Faith Hedgepeth in 2012 rocked the community of Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Faith, a college student at the University of North Carolina, was found brutally murdered in her off-campus apartment. The case remained unsolved for years, and it wasn't until DNA evidence was finally analyzed that the true culprit was identified. In 2022, the murderer, a man named Michael Roy Jones, was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His sentence was one of the heaviest ever for a person convicted of a cold case murder. On the evening of September 6, 2012, 19-year-old Faith Hedgepeth, a student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, attended a rush event for Alpha Pi Omega, a Native American sorority she hoped to join. After the event, she headed to the university's Davis Library with her friend Rosario to study. The two exchanged texts with her father about joining the sorority before leaving the library around 11:30 p.m. and returning to their apartment. Later, the two went to The Thrill, a nightclub in Chapel Hill, where they danced until around 2 a.m. After leaving the club, they returned home by 3 a.m. A neighbor who was awake reported hearing thumping sounds around that time, which were likely linked to the events leading to Hedgepeth's death. At 3:40 a.m., a text from Hedgepeth's phone was sent to her ex-boyfriend, Brandon Edwards, asking him to come over to help Rosario.
Breaking news, a man is now charged with the murder of Faith Hedgepeth, a UNC Chapel Hill student found beaten to death in her apartment.
This was the last known activity from her phone. Around 4 a.m., Rosario left the apartment to get a ride from a friend, Jordan McCrary. She thought Hedgepeth was asleep and left the door unlocked. Rosario spent the rest of the night with a friend, but when she returned to the apartment around 11 a.m. the next day, she was unable to reach Hedgepeth. Rosario and another friend, Marisol Rangel, entered the apartment and found Hedgepeth's bloodied body in her bedroom. The young woman was partially covered by a quilt and partially nude. They immediately called 911, and police arrived to investigate the tragic crime, which has remained unsolved. In 2016, the killer's luck ran out. A major breakthrough in the case occurred when law enforcement re-examined the DNA evidence. A match was found in a national database for a man named Michael Roy Jones. Jones had previously been arrested for a different crime, and his DNA was now linked to the murder of Faith Hedgepeth.
In December of that same year, the FBI comes on board to help Chapel Hill police in their investigation and develops a profile of the killer.
Jones had been living in the same area as Faith at the time of her murder, and investigators began to suspect that he had been the person who killed her. After months of surveillance and further investigation, Jones was arrested in 2021, half a decade after the suspect and almost after the murder. His arrest was a shock to the community, and it provided a sense of closure to Faith's grieving family. Michael Roy Jones's trial began in early 2022, and it was clear from the beginning that the evidence against him was overwhelming. The DNA match was a key piece of evidence, but investigators also uncovered more details that connected Jones to the crime. During the trial, Jones denied any involvement in Faith's murder, but the evidence pointed directly to him. The prosecution presented testimony from forensic experts, DNA specialists, and investigators who had worked tirelessly on the case. The defense team attempted to argue that the DNA match could have been a mistake, but the jury found Jones guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced Michael Roy Jones to life in prison.
And key evidence in the case, including a biscuit bag that was from the popular Chapel Hill restaurant,
without the possibility of parole. The sentence was seen as just punishment for the brutality of the crime and the fact that Faith Hedgepeth's family had to endure years of uncertainty and grief before finally finding justice. The life sentence ensured that Jones would never have the chance to hurt anyone else, and it brought a sense of peace to the community that had been shaken by the murder. The conviction and life sentence handed down to Michael Roy Jones were significant for several reasons. Not only did it bring justice to Faith Hedgepeth's family, but it also highlighted the importance of continuing to investigate cold cases and using modern forensic methods to solve old crimes. The Hedgepeth case also became a symbol of resilience for the community of Chapel Hill, where Faith had been a beloved student and friend. Her family and friends praised the investigators and law enforcement officials who had never given up on the case, and they felt a sense of relief knowing that her killer had finally been brought to justice. In addition, to the legal implications of the case, the murder of Faith Hedgepeth drew attention to issues of campus safety and the need for universities to take stronger action to protect students. The case prompted many to call for better security measures on college campuses and increased support for students who are victims of violent crimes.
21-year-old Deary Bourne died after being shot Friday afternoon at the Camelot Village Apartments just off South Estes Drive.
The resolution of Faith Hedgepeth's case marked the end of a long and painful chapter for her family, but it also sparked further efforts to ensure that other cold cases don't go unsolved. Faith's family, in particular her mother, became advocates for justice reform and for the rights of victims' families. They used their voice to raise awareness about the importance of continuing to search for justice, even when the trail seems cold. Faith's story continues to inspire people to fight for justice and to support victims' families who are still seeking answers. Her life may have been tragically cut short, but her legacy lives on in the efforts to solve other cold cases and prevent such tragedies from happening to others. Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. The case of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell became one of the most shocking and bizarre criminal stories in recent years. It involved the disappearance and deaths of Vallow's two children, Tylee Ryan and Joshua J.J. Vallow, whose remains were discovered in Chad Daybell's backyard in June 2020. This case involved not only murders, but also bizarre cult-like beliefs, with both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell believing in apocalyptic visions and a religious end-of-days scenario. Their relationship, which escalated into a sinister plot, captured widespread attention as the investigation unfolded. And till date, what this two did still leaves crowds shaking. In 2019, Lori Vallow, a mother of two from Idaho, became involved with Chad Daybell, a self-published author who had written books about the end of the world and near-death experiences. Lori and Chad began to form a relationship based on their shared apocalyptic beliefs, with Lori reportedly becoming obsessed with the idea that her children, Tylee and JJ, were zombies due to their behaviors. In September 2019, Tylee Ryan, 16, and JJ Vallow, 7, went missing, and Lori and Chad's odd behavior raised suspicions. They fled Idaho and moved to Hawaii, all the while telling law enforcement that the children were safe and living with other family members. In reality, the children were already dead, and Lori and Chad's actions suggested they were trying to cover up their crimes. The investigation began when family members and friends of the children became concerned after receiving no communication from them. In November 2019, authorities conducted a welfare check on the children, and Lori Vallow was unable to provide any concrete information about their whereabouts. Shortly thereafter, both she and Chad fled. In June 2020, authorities discovered the remains of Tylee and JJ buried on Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho. The discovery came after a long investigation and multiple legal battles, with Lori and Chad facing charges of murder, conspiracy, and destruction of evidence. They had allegedly conspired to kill both children, believing that their deaths were necessary to prepare for an upcoming apocalyptic event. Lori Vallow was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and grand theft. Chad Daybell faced similar charges, including murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The case was heavily publicized, not only because of the brutal nature of the crime, but also because of the strange religious beliefs tied to the motivations behind the murders. Both Lori and Chad were held in custody awaiting trial, and in May 2021, Lori was declared mentally unfit to stand trial, delaying her proceedings. However, in 2023, both Lori and Chad were found guilty. Lori was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, while Chad received a death sentence. This sentence reflected the extreme nature of their crimes, especially the deaths of 2 innocent children. The tragic circumstances surrounding the case, combined with the bizarre religious beliefs of the perpetrators, made it one of the most chilling cases of modern times. The sentencing for Lori and Chad was one of the most anticipated and controversial in recent years. Lori's sentence, life without parole, was met with some relief from the public and the victims' families. On the other hand, Chad Daybell's death sentence sparked discussions about the appropriateness of such a severe penalty, particularly given his role in orchestrating the deaths alongside Lori. The case has left a profound impact on the communities involved, especially the families of Tylee and JJ, who had to endure the horror of losing 2 children to such brutal and incomprehensible violence. The case sparked national outrage, especially among the followers of Chad Daybell's religious teachings. Many of Daybell's former followers were shocked to learn about the dark side of his beliefs, and the case shed light on the dangerous potential of certain cult-like ideologies. The sentencing of both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell was a long-awaited chapter in this tragic story. As the case continues to unfold, it serves as a reminder of the tragic consequences of unchecked fanaticism and the devastating impact on innocent lives. El Chapo. Joaquin Archivaldo Guzman Loera, better known as El Chapo, stands as one of the most infamous drug lords in modern history. His life of crime, which spanned decades, ended with a dramatic conviction and sentencing on July 17, 2019. U.S. District Judge Brian M. Cogan sentenced him to life imprisonment plus an additional 30 years. Alongside the prison sentence, Guzman was ordered to forfeit a staggering $12.6 billion, a testament to the scale of his criminal empire. This final reckoning followed years of investigation, daring arrests, and court proceedings. Guzman's downfall was a major win for U.S. and international law enforcement agencies, showcasing the lengths to which they went to capture and convict the elusive leader of the Sinaloa cartel. Guzman's journey into crime began humbly, but spiraled rapidly into infamy. In the 1980s, he was a mid-level operator in the burgeoning Sinaloa cartel. He earned his nickname El Rapido for his ability to move drugs from Mexico to the United States with remarkable speed. By the 1990s, Guzman had risen to prominence within the cartel. However, his activities were interrupted when he was arrested in Mexico in 1993. The setback didn't last long. Guzman famously escaped from a maximum security Mexican prison in 2001 by hiding in a laundry cart. His freedom marked the start of a reign of terror. Joining forces with Ismael El Mayo Zambada, he solidified his control over the Sinaloa cartel, which would go on to become one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the world. Under Guzman's leadership, the Sinaloa cartel was responsible for flooding the U.S. with cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana by leveraging creative transportation methods, including submarines, tunnels, and even carbon fiber airplanes. Guzman ensured that billions of dollars worth of drugs reached American soil. His cartel was no stranger to violence. To maintain dominance, Guzman relied on an army of assassins and personal guards, equipped with military-grade weapons, including rocket-propelled grenades. Witnesses recounted harrowing stories of Guzman personally ordering kidnappings, torture, and executions. His arsenal even included a gold-plated AK-47 and diamond-encrusted pistols, a macabre symbol of his wealth and power. Guzman's empire thrived not only on violence, but also on corruption. He infiltrated government agencies at every level, from local law enforcement to high-ranking officials. The cartel paid millions of dollars in bribes, ensuring that its operations continued unchecked for years. The hunt for Guzman became an international priority. After years on the run, he was arrested in 2014 by Mexican authorities, but his Houdini-like reputation held true. In 2015, Guzman escaped yet again, this time through a mile-long underground tunnel dug directly into his prison cell. The escape was a global embarrassment for Mexican authorities, but it only strengthened the resolve of law enforcement agencies to bring him to justice. In January 2016, after a daring raid in Los Mochis, Mexico, Guzman was captured for the final time. Guzman's trial in Brooklyn, New York was a spectacle. Over 3 months, the court heard testimony from 14 cooperating witnesses, including former cartel members. These accounts revealed chilling details about Guzman's operations, including his use of submarines and secret tunnels, as well as the inner workings of his cartel's drug empire. Evidence included intercepted communications, videos, ledgers, and testimonies about Guzman's involvement in acts of extreme violence. The trial also shed light on the billions of dollars in drug proceeds funneled through creative money laundering schemes, including the use of shell companies and bulk cash smuggling. On July 17, 2019, Guzman was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 30 years. The court's decision marked the end of his reign, but it could not undo the devastation caused by his actions. Assistant Attorney General Brian Benskowski remarked, "The long road that brought El Chapo Guzman Loera to a United States courtroom is lined with drugs, death, and destruction, but ends today with justice." U.S. Attorney Richard Donahue added, "Never again will he pour poison into our country or make millions as innocent lives are lost." The financial blow to Guzman was equally significant. He was ordered to forfeit $12.6 billion, an amount reflective of the cartel's estimated revenue during his tenure, while Guzman now resides in the maximum security ADX Florence prison in Colorado. The fight against the Sinaloa cartel continues. The organization remains active under new leadership, underscoring the challenges of dismantling entrenched criminal enterprises. The capture and conviction of El Chapo are milestones in the global war on drugs, but they also raise questions about the future of cartel operations and the power vacuum left in his wake. El Chapo's story serves as both a cautionary tale and a stark reminder of the devastating human cost of the drug trade. The billions he amassed were built on the suffering of countless individuals and communities, from the violence in Mexico to the addiction crises in the United States. As Guzman spends the remainder of his life behind bars, his legacy remains a symbol of the ongoing battle against organized crime. The impact of his actions will be felt for generations, but his downfall offers hope that justice can prevail, even against the most powerful criminal figures. If you enjoyed these cases, then make sure to watch our next ones shown on screen.